Hi, my name is Kellie Keyes. Today I'm going to talk about pump and dump schemes, advance fee fraud, and microcap fraud. First, I want to talk about pump and dump schemes. If any of you have ever seen The Wolf of Wall Street, that is a classic example of a pump and dump scheme. Basically, in a pump and dump scheme, promoters attempt to artificially boost the price of a stock with false information. This is referred to as the pump. A lot of times this is done by fraudsters buying excessive amounts of unvaluable stock, causing the stock price to rise. Once the stock price has risen, the inflated shares sell off rapidly into the security market by the fraudster. This is known as the dump. Once fraudsters stop hyping the stock, the price falls back to normal and investors lose their money. The best way to avoid a pump and dump scheme is to always do your research before you believe any high-pressure sales pitch. Also, recognize that promises of quick gains are rarely true. Find out where the stock trades independently verified claims. Always use a stockbroker you know and trust, and ask a stockbroker where he is licensed and do some checks with the licensing agency. Here's a short clip on pump and dump schemes.
I had a very good friend who was a stockbroker that had never tried to sell me any stock. And he called up one day and said that he had something I ought to buy, and I just did it. At 83 cents a share, he called me in 4 months and said it's up to $4, and that he knew it was going to 10 or 20. Trusting him, I bought some more in a deal called Titan Industries.
The trading price of the stock has been artificially inflated by innocent investors. The perpetrators and insiders on the fraud will sell into that higher inflated trading price, cash out, and make off with their profits, while the innocent investor is left holding large quantities of worthless stock.
He said the reason it was going down was because they were going to go on the NASDAQ and that they hadn't gotten their paperwork in. And we found out that he had a pump and dump scheme. There were people involved in Florida, La Jolla, California, Monroe, Louisiana, Kansas City, Houston. We got all this information, and when we got the $8 million punitive damage, we started, of course, that was enough to pursue it further.
Various calculations by different groups on what the scale of pump and dump stock frauds are in any typical year, but suffice it to say that it is a multi-billion-dollar business with multi-billion-dollar losses to basically innocent, unsavvy investors in any given year.
Deal with a stockbroker you know and trust when making stock investments. Make sure you ask the stock salesperson where he's licensed, and then do some checks with the licensing agency. Don't fall for a high-pressure sales pitch to buy an unheard-of stock. Always do some independent research before you invest in any stock.
Next, I want to talk about advance fee fraud. Advance fee fraud is defined as a confidence trick in which the target is persuaded to advance sums of money in the hopes of realizing a significantly larger gain. Advance fee fraud occurs when an investor asks to pay upfront or in advance for a fee, payment, or commission for the deal to go through in a later date, which rarely does. Advance fee schemers generally target investors who already purchased underperforming assets. There are many variations of advance fee schemes. A common example is a company claiming to be able to clean up your credit report and offers to do so in exchange for an advance fee. Con artists will offer to find financing arrangements for their clients who pay a finder's fee in advance. They often require their clients to sign a contract stating they will pay the fee in advance. When they are introduced to the financing source, victims often learn that they are ineligible for financing only after they paid the advance fee. To avoid advance fee fraud, you should always make sure you know the individuals or parties you are dealing with. Make sure you fully understand any business arrangements before entering into it. Do not do business with strangers, especially if you did not initiate the contact, and also be aware of businesses that operate from post office, mailboxes, or mail drops that do not have a street address. The next clip is a good example of what advance fee fraud might look like.
The Nigerian scam. The Wikipedia article on advanced fee fraud defines it as a confidence trick in which the target is persuaded to advance sums of money in the hope of realizing a significantly larger gain. The type of Nigerian scam important to this story involves the cashing of a bogus check. Basically, the victim is mailed a fraudulent check, told to cash it, keep some of the money for themselves as advance payment for employment, and wire the rest of it to the perpetrators of the scam. This all must be done quickly because it only takes a few days for the fake check to get back to the bank, and then the person who cashed it, the victim as it were, is stuck with the cost of covering the check. My first experience with this type of scam was during the summer of 2009. I had responded to a Craigslist job offer. The posting said that someone was seeking a personal driver for 3 months over the summer. I don't recall the exact phrasing of the posting, but it was brief and rather ambiguous. Scam? Well, I was looking for work at the time, and I was responding to multiple ads each day on Craigslist. When I responded to this job, I sent an email that included facts about me, such as my experience as a furniture delivery driver in Chicago, how long I'd lived there. It also had my phone number, my resume, which had my job history, where I went to college, and even my home address. Well, I got an email a couple of days later from somebody. Whoever actually wrote this email only barely knew English, just barely enough English to communicate. Scam. He told me he was a busy international businessman, said his name was Richard Williams, and his elderly aunt was going to be coming to Chicago for 3 months over the summer and she needed somebody to drive her around. She liked to go shopping, wanted to go sightseeing, stuff like that. Then he thought it was important to tell me about the car, and rather than telling me his aunt's name, or where she'd be staying, or what flight number, he decided to tell me about the car. Scam! This is exactly what he wrote. 2007 Honda Civic, mileage 17,202, exterior color gray, interior color cream, engine 4-cylinder, transmission automatic, body style coupe. Details: 2-wheel drive, adjustable steering wheel, airbags, air conditioning, anti-lock brakes, CD, cruise control, power locks, power steering, power windows, premium wheels, spoiler, sun/moonroof. And then he says, let me know if you're familiar with this kind of car and if you can handle it carefully and drive it perfectly and safely. I mean, I guess I could operate it safely. I've never driven a gray car with a spoiler before, but I didn't tell him that. I mean, I want the job, you know? I mean, why would anybody think that going into so much detail about the car was actually going to lend credibility to his story? In his defense, I might have included in my first email that I was detail-oriented. Anyway, he went on to say that I'd be making $40 an hour and that my first week's payment would be $360. Not bad for part-time work, $40 an hour. Driving some little old lady around the city, take her shopping and whatnot. He also told me that he was going to be sending me a check for $3,500 and that I was to keep my first week's pay up front. Oh, scam. And send the rest of the money to the moving agency, which is going to be handling his aunt's luggage. She's got a lot, I mean, she's gonna be there for 3 months. She's, obviously she's wealthy. Her nephew's a successful businessman, so she's probably got a lot of stuff, you know? He wanted my address and some personal information, none of which I hadn't already provided him with. I'd already given him my address, my phone number, my college course history, my employment history. Like, if he really wanted to, like, screw me somehow, I was just repeating stuff that I'd already told him. So I figured, what's the harm in that? No social security number, no bank account, nothing like that. Not that I actually have an identity that he could steal. If anything, he'd probably help my credit. He sends an email the next day and explains that he is going to be away on business in London and that he will mail me a check in the morning. He also asked me to let him know as soon as I get the check. As soon as I get the check, let him know. Well, I get the check a few days later, and actually by this time I kind of already forgotten about the whole thing. So I was a real surprise to get this envelope in the mail that was handwritten with my name and address, no return address, and it had an airmail stamp on it that was in French. It said airmail in French. And the only thing in the envelope was a check. This check. It's been in my little handy pocketbook for a while. It ripped a couple weeks ago, but you can still read it. I've blurred out the more sensitive information included on the fake check. By the way, guys, my name is actually Ken. We'll discuss that at a later date. First thing about this check is, who is David Jones? He never told me about David Jones. I guess I just have to assume that he's a business associate of Richard Williams. Yeah, so this check's already a little suspect. It says it has a watermark, so if you hold it up to the light, you can see the watermark, but that's not true. Because even if you hold it like this, it's got the same, there's nothing in the paper. The only watermark actually left on this is the watermark I left on it by setting a cold glass of whiskey on it, condensation running down it, made the inkjet printer ink bleed. Anyway, I email him immediately and tell him that I have received his check.
Lastly, I'm going to talk about microcap fraud. Microcap stock fraud is a form of securities fraud involving stocks of microcap companies. Microcap companies are generally defined in the United States as those with a market capitalization of under $250 million. Many microcap companies are penny stocks, which the SEC defines as a security that trades at less than $5 per share, is not listed on the national exchange, and fails to meet other specific criteria. Many of these companies don't file reports with the SEC, which allows fraudsters to produce false and misleading information to trade. They usually put out information through email spam, paid promoters, and internet message boards. Microcap fraud generally takes place among stocks traded in the OTC Bulletin Board and the Pink Sheets electronic quotation service, which are stocks that usually do not meet the requirements to be listed on the stock exchange. Microcap fraud encompasses several types of investor fraud, including pump and dump scheme, which was discussed earlier, chop stocks, which are stocks purchased for pennies and sold for dollars, providing both brokers and stock promoters massive profits, in which case brokers are often paid under the table undisclosed payoffs to sell such stocks, and also dump and dilute schemes, where companies repeatedly issue shares for no reason other than taking investors' money away. Companies using this kind of scheme tend to periodically reverse split the stock. Other schemes such as bait and switch, unauthorized trading, no net sales policies in which companies are prohibited or discouraged from selling stocks. Here's a clip on microcap fraud.
Test.
They use the same sting and wiretap tools traditionally deployed to nab organized criminals and drug dealers.
Make yourself comfortable.
But in this case, the FBI was targeting executives from small penny stock companies. These are tiny companies known as microcaps, whose shares typically trade for a penny or less. Prosecutors have charged 22 people. 18 of those have pled guilty or been convicted after trials. Why? For allegedly taking part in a deal offered by an undercover FBI agent posing as a corrupt hedge fund manager to buy stock in companies at an inflated price in exchange for kickbacks. As Gene Eaglesham reports exclusively in the Wall Street Journal, Operation Penny Pincher is one of the biggest investment fraud stings ever mounted by the federal government. Here's how the FBI sting worked. A microcap executive is introduced through a finder to John Kelly, an FBI agent posing as the manager of a fake hedge fund called CFIN Capital. The FBI's cover story was that CFIN Capital was based in New York. Agents set up a fake satellite office in the Boston suburb of Burlington, Massachusetts, for John Kelly to do his secret deals, which ripped off CFIN's investors. The sham office was complete with business cards and swag in the form of this foam whale, and also hidden cameras.
My side is I'll get you the money, and I expect my share to come back.
To capture interactions between John Kelly and company executives as they accept his offers to overpay for shares in exchange for those kickbacks. Among those who took the bait, an executive at an animal feed company. Mr. Kelly, in a meeting with VitaLife executive John Jordan, explains,
I'm expensive. I get a 50% kickback on whatever I invest.
Mr. Jordan confirms he understands the deal.
No, your fee is fine because, you're definitely bailing me out.
Well, and I appreciate that. And that's why, again, when I started out, I had a hard time, a strict Catholic upbringing. But I realized that, this whole game is to make money.
Well, it is. It's the reality,
yeah.
In this case, the FBI agent agrees to buy up to $5 million of VitaLife stock, with payments of increasing sizes. The FBI wires the first payment of $32,000 to the company. In turn, Mr. Jordan wires the $16,000 kickback to another sham company set up by the FBI called Water's Edge. As John Kelly explains in an email, he created Water's Edge simply for the kickbacks, which have to be hidden. And another person also gets stung in this sting, the finder, 63-year-old James Prangy, who helped penny stock companies raise money. He too had been propositioned by John Kelly to play his role in the illegal deal.
It's basically $250,000 a deal for you. I don't know what you were thinking in terms of compensation, if that squares with how you were thinking, or... Okay.
So for his services in the VitaLife deal, Mr. Prangy was sent his 10% kickback and then to prison. A federal jury in Boston convicting both Prangy and Jordan of fraud, each man now serving a 30-month sentence. They're appealing their convictions.